failing to confront the awkward reality that this Chinese communist regime has all along been pursuing a discrete strategy to purchase influence economically, technologically, and indeed militarily under its own terms. And China is now in geopolitical competition with the West. That, I'm afraid, is how the next decade is going to play out.
The Conservative MP Tobias Ellwood, who's chair of the Defence Select Committee. Morning, Tobias.
Good morning to you.
I imagine listening to that, it's really profound, isn't it, on these big three priorities that Rishi Sunak has that are outlined in the Sunday Times this morning. One of them being sort out these NHS waiting times and sorting out A&E. Just about how big the need is to get that done quickly.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, a huge tribute to all those people that are working in this sector. There's huge pressures on the NHS. There has been since COVID, and now we've got this dual concern of both COVID rising and indeed flu as well during this time. So it is important that we expedite the measures that the government is already taking to make sure that we expand our health service, to expand the number of people that are working in there, to make sure that Britain can get the care that it absolutely deserves.
How is he going to fix this, though, Tobias?
Well, as I say, there's been record sums of money put into the NHS, but clearly that is not enough. What we're seeing here is perhaps a consequence of COVID. This is a once-in-a-generational impact, which has really tested the NHS to its limits. Clearly, the way that Adrian was describing there, that the additional pressures now that's been experienced in the NHS is going to require, again, another look at what can be done to make sure that services can improve. Here in Bournemouth, for example, the hospital has now got that critical status again, which means that they are indeed overwhelmed. So this will be concerning. And I think as soon as Parliament returns next week, we'll see a series of debates about it. And I'm sure a statement by the Health Secretary, Steve Barclay.
I'm not sure if you've seen the front page of the Sunday Times this morning. New research suggests polls in so-called red wall seats in Northern England could still back the Tories in 2024, despite Labour's consistent 20-point lead in the national polls. So all is not lost then, apparently, for the Tories in the next general election. Do you really believe that?
I mean, absolutely. There's everything to fight for the next general election. Does anybody actually know what the Labour Party stands for? Absolutely, there's concerns about what the Conservatives did in 2022. Let's put our hands up and say, we got it wrong under Liz Truss and the economic direction that we were travelling. But thanks to the British system, we were able to provide a massive course correction. You can't do that in countries like the United States. You're stuck with the leader for another 4 years. So absolutely, we've got fiscal responsibility back in place. This is actually a benchmark for Conservatives normally, but we need to do more than that. We need to make sure that we deserve it to be in power for another 5 years. And so, yes, if we can provide the necessary energy to fix the problems such as the NHS, but there's also bigger issues at play. We've done very well on Ukraine, but one of the reasons why food prices are high, there's a cost of living crisis in this country, is because those ships aren't departing from Odessa. Now, if we start to fix Ukraine properly, where Britain's already taken the lead, this is naturally what we do on the international stage. Let's go further than that in this year. Let's conclude this conflict in assisting Ukraine. That will actually allow food prices in this country and indeed oil and gas prices to settle as well. These are the three ingredients that are affecting the cost of living: oil, gas, grain.
And that's one of the three priorities for Rishi Sunak that he's going to outline in the new year. According to the current polling, you're predicted to lose your Bournemouth East seat, Tobias. Probably not the best news for New Year's Day, but I mean, do you expect to keep it?
I'm not sure why you're even taking stock of a polling taking place right now. I just mentioned the fact that nobody knows what Labour stands for. They're unhappy with the Conservatives, but as you started this conversation, is to say actually people are now reconsidering the Conservatives. Prime Minister is doing an excellent job in moving our country forward through very, very difficult times. You have to ask yourself, who do you want in number 10 moving forward from here? An untested Labour Party that, don't forget, it does not have a great track record in where it will spend. Or do you want somebody like Rishi Sunak that's able to actually steady the ship
Yeah.
and advance the country forward. We've got 24 months, 2 years to actually work out what's going on. I suggest that the polls are going to look very, very different between now and in 2 years' time. So I really wouldn't spend too much time, poring over the details of individual seats. Bearing in mind that any poll is done, I mean, look, these are people who has done go online. They take a national impact and then they try and spread it around through all the seats. So I'm not sure what you read there necessarily applies to what's happening here in Bournemouth East.
Yeah, let's talk more about foreign policy. How do you expect the Prime Minister's foreign policy is going to develop over the next year? We've been quite clear where he stands over for Ukraine, but what other threats do you think he'll be bringing into his speeches in 2023?
Well, I think 2023 will be a challenging year, both domestically and internationally, as we've been discussing. I say this from as chair of the Defence Select Committee. The threats we are facing are complex and they are growing, and we are not prepared for what's coming over the hill. China and Russia are working ever closer together to exploit our dated international rules-based order. The UK has done well, as I say, to rekindle our international statecraft regarding Ukraine, but we can do more. I mentioned those grain ships, but the Wagner Group, for example, should be listed. And we should also wake up that this is not just about Ukraine, but about Russia pursuing its expansionist geostrategic policies to push against the West. We're back into another Cold War situation. And we've also got this issue to do with what's going to happen with China. It's got its eyes on Taiwan. And if that happens, if China takes that country by force, then we will see sanctions put in place, counter sanctions as well. I would encourage every single business in the UK to look carefully at its supply chain, and if it's connected with China, it needs to decouple. That's where we need to go in 2023.
Do you think the government has taken the threat of China invading Taiwan seriously enough, Tobias?
Well, a report did emerge, an internal report did emerge a couple of weeks ago to say that they are starting to look at this, and I very much welcome this. But as I say, we are still in denial as to what China is all about. We've been risk averse regarding China's ever aggressive behavior. For too long, we've turned a blind eye to its human rights issues, its democratic deficit, the vast military developments in the South China Sea, for example, and how it's ensnaring countries into long-term debt through its One Belt, One Road programs, all in the hope that by us leveraging China's phenomenal economic growth, it would become more like us. But that clearly isn't going to happen. We're failing to confront the awkward reality that this Chinese communist regime has all along been pursuing a discrete strategy to purchase influence economically, technologically, and indeed militarily under its own terms. And China is now in geopolitical competition with the West. That, I'm afraid, is how the next decade is going to play out.
Tobias, appreciate you taking the time to speak to us on New Year's Day.
Thank you.
Tobias Ellwood, chair of the Defence Select Committee and the Conservative MP.